Amy Dunn won in Gone Girl by weaponizing the trope of the cool girl. Actually playing the cool girl will get you used and discarded. So the ultimate cool girl in the movie was Margot. She really was not like other girls. This is Nick's fraternal twin who doesn't really like Amy because, she's too much of a girly girl and she demands too much of Nick's attention. She runs the bar with Nick. She centers her life around Nick. She's the only one who really understands Nick. But what happened to Margot? The first time we see her really, really upset in the movie and in the book is when it's revealed that Nick has a mistress, Andy. And she's not mad her sister-in-law's gone missing. She's mad her brother cheated on her sister-in-law and didn't tell her about it. The cool girl is not always your romantic rival. Sometimes it's his mom, sometimes it's his sister, and these women really will encourage him to do you wrong as long as they can be in the mix, as long as they can feel like they somehow have one over on you. She was concerned that Nick cheated because he could go to jail, he could go to prison for Amy's murder, even though he wasn't guilty, not because it was wrong for him to do. And she was continually sacrificing everything for Nick, just like a cool girl, and receiving nothing in return. She ends up mortgaging her house to get him defense money for his lawyer. She sacrifices her own safety and peace to host him at her house when the police need his house as a crime scene, and later on when it's too overrun with reporters. And what thanks does she get? Amy, who is resentful of this toxically close relationship, ends up hiding all the stuff she got to implicate Nick in Go's garage, or shed, or whatever you want to call it. In the book and the movie, lawyer Tanner tells Nick and Go that could make her an accessory to Amy's murder if Nick eventually gets charged. And before you go thinking, oh, Amy's so mean, Nick treated Go the exact same way because he was having his affair with Andy in that same shed. And that's why Amy chose to store that stuff there. Now, clearly, as Go did not know about the affair, this was being done without her knowledge. But the fact is, he felt comfortable implicating his sister in his nonsense because she's the cool girl. He knew even if she caught him, she wasn't going to stop him. And so he continued to disrespect her, to use her at will. The thing that was the craziest to me in the book was how much she performed for her brother. He came home from a hard day and she just started carrying on this one-sided monologue, a game apparently they used to play, imitating their mother, telling these boring stories, and just doing this to make him laugh, to take some of the tension off. She made him dinner. And even though it's not, super domestic, it was just peanut butter jelly or a grilled cheese sandwich with barbecue chips, that sort of thing. She's consistently doing all of these very domesticated things to take care of him. Even though Gone Girl is a very long book, Gillian Flynn is a master economist when it comes to words. No scene is wasted. So I know all of these repeated domestic scenes of Nick and his female twin have a meaning. Nick is looking for labor from a woman, any woman. When their mom passes away, Go becomes his designated woman surrogate. And she's always existed on the edges of his life. This person who's very dependent on his approval. And because she lets him get away with any and everything, when Amy's not enough of a cool girl for him anymore, he goes running back to Go, the original. Amy's so mean. Amy holds me accountable. So I'm going to come back to you, a person who never has any demands of me, who never steps up and asks for equality, and I'm going to just revel and bask in the glow of your constant approval. But while Amy ends up better off than ever through her own machinations, Go ends up in a really hard luck spot. As I said, she mortgaged her house, already not having much money, to secure Nick a good lawyer so he doesn't go to prison. Even when Amy comes back and creates more revenue from her new book and all of her appearances, Nick doesn't offer Go any money back. And even before the baby's in the picture, Nick essentially chooses Amy. He's obsessed with Amy. Go is begging him not to go back into that situation. Like I said, long before there's a baby involved, she's saying, let it go, come be free. But she's really saying, leave Amy alone and pay some attention to me. And what does she get for all of her effort? Nothing. A lot of women would never play the cool girl for a man, but they have no problem doing it for a male relative. Stop playing the cool girl for your brother, your dad, your uncles, whatever. Stop changing right to wrong for them. Stop trying to ignore the fact that they do other women dirty, because if they will do it and laugh with you, they will do it to you. Go thought she had that thing on a string, but in the end, Nick ended up doing her just as dirty as he did his wife. Men who are disloyal cannot be trusted in any aspect of life. Nick's main problem was that he was raised by a boy mom. And you're like, what are you talking about? The woman only had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and they were fraternal twins. But yet she couldn't stop herself from sucking out of Nick's ass. The woman was sick with terminal cancer, and she was still going over to his house and cutting the crust off of his bread. She was ironing his clothes and making him blueberry pies while she was on her deathbed, and he wouldn't even go see her in the hospital, wouldn't sit with her while she had chemo. She had problems. And you're like, oh, she was just involved with her child. Oh, it was making her last days happy to spend time with her child. First of all, Nick wasn't at the house when she was doing all of that. Nick jettisoned her because any woman in his life who was inconvenient, like his sick mother, could fuck all the way off, in his opinion. I am really enjoying having no restrictions on this new account. But yes, Amy would be at Amy's house that she bought, and his mother would come over there doing all this damn housewife shit, trying to get her son to notice her. She needed help. But this is the pattern. These women get emotionally enmeshed with their boys because their husbands are fuckwits who are most likely abusive. The husband doesn't meet her emotional needs, so she turns to her son to meet her emotional needs. And Nick wasn't, great at that, but he wasn't abusive. He let his mother fuss and fawn over him as much as she liked, and he gave her a little bit of validation. And to her, that was the sun, the moon, the stars. And you're like, well, maybe she was just close to her children. Yeah, when did you see her spending time with her daughter? Her daughter who lived in the same town as her long before Nick deigned to move back? I'm waiting. Because she never did. And all the excuses that boy moms usually use to justify themselves just aren't present here. They like to say things like, oh, well, your first child is such a special love. They were born at the same time, so that's not going to fly. Oh, well, you like to have that child that stays close to home be close to you. He was just a homebody. She said Nick was always outside. He liked to wander around. He was never at home. So that's not how you got close to him. Your daughter was an introvert. Your daughter was a bookworm, and you couldn't spare a glance for Go. Go probably secretly despised her mother. Because boy moms give birth to spoiled, narcissistic, entitled boys and pick-me girls. This is why Go is a pick-me. She seems to dislike her conditioning, but she has been taught all your life you serve men. So Go ends up as the cool girl, the real cool girl. Amy's pretending. Go is the real article. And it's not a fun persona to put on. It's a mental health issue. Go can never allow a man to see her having real emotions or being less than perfect because she's been taught that's a sign of weakness. Men don't want to deal with all of that. You're disgusting if you need anything. So for Nick, she is an endless source of labor. She puts on a good face. She always stops whatever she's doing to entertain him. And no matter how angry she is, like when she finds out he's having the affair, like when she finds out he hasn't ended the affair and still having it inside of her house, when Nick treats her badly, when she just says, hey, what the devil are you doing? She struggles with calling him out. She struggles with getting him to give her the bare minimum respect. I mean, this is a woman who mortgaged her house to secure his legal defense, while she's doing all the work at the bar so he can be available for the police or not come in and deal with the public because he's infamous as a possible murderer. She does everything to support him, and he treats her just like that, like she's supporting cast. She's the backup girl. He's the star. This is how he's been taught to view her. And the only time he accords Go any praise or any notice is to say, oh, well, she's so funny. She's just like me. Or she's not like other girls. She's just like me. The only time he respects Go is when she shows some tendency to be like Nick. And I'm doing this because it's easy to think of Maureen, that's their mother, as a victim. She was in a relationship that was emotionally abusive at the very least. Their father seemed like a huge jackass who didn't want to be there. And that's why Nick's story is so relatable for so many people. They have been raised in that angry Gen X house where the guy stomps around and slams things. He isn't kind to his wife. He just views her and the children as a weight around his neck, as what's keeping him from a happy life. It took me a long time to realize Maureen was not innocent. She set up this division between her children. She was unkind, at the very least, uncaring towards her daughter's needs. And she expected her daughter-in-law to worship the ground her grimy-ass son walked on and refused to acknowledge when Nick did anything wrong. And that's what made him so entitled. He thought he could take all of Amy's money, spend it on the bar and on another girl, because he made sure to buy her Valentine's Day gifts and birthday gifts and whatnot while he was doing fuck all for Amy, hadn't even bought her an anniversary gift. Women can be victims, but they can be part of the system too. I feel like a lot of you all don't understand Gone Girl. So somebody asked, please don't tell me you're on Amy's side with this one. This movie is not about sides, okay? Nick is objectively wrong. He has been cheating on his wife for over a year after using her money to buy his bar, the house they live in, and everything else that they have. After they both lost their jobs, he acted like only his job loss mattered and then forced her to move to his home state because his mother was sick. He said, oh, we're going to take a year, do the right thing because we don't have anything tying us to New York. But when they got there, did he do anything approaching the right thing? No, he took Amy down there to do the work for him. Amy, who wasn't even close to his mother, ended up sitting with her through chemo and her doctor's appointments. And I'm speaking to the book here, the movie. I love the movie, but we need the book for the deep analysis. And some people might say, oh, well, you're thinking about Amy's point of view. No, think about Nick's point of view. Nick told you in recounting with the cops or his lawyer or his sister all the happenings of the past year or 2 years. Did he mention sitting with his mama? Oh, what's that? Not one time. His own mother said, oh, I don't mind. I don't need him to prove his love by, actually doing things for me and being there for me. He's my boy. Boy moms suck. So Nick is just an objectively bad person. But this is not about men versus women. It's not even about Nick versus Amy. This is about systems. The point, in my humble opinion, of Gone Girl is to show you that being a good woman, being the bigger person, will always get you screwed. And it's not just about Amy. Look at Maureen. Maureen was a good woman, wasn't she? She was good to her husband, who was an emotionally abusive, withholding jackass. And she was good, at least to her son. She was, at the very least, not abusive to her daughter. That's all I can give her there. But she was a good woman to the men in her life. And what did that get her? Fuck all. Her husband was a jerk. And then when she finally divorced him, her child, her son she poured everything into, was super neglectful. Didn't care about her except as a means to praise him. Someone to get emotional labor out of. But when she was inconvenient, he tossed her aside. Amy's own parents were soulmated. She says they are just in this wonderful true love marriage, and I always wanted the same thing for myself. But what did she get out of it? The woman had 8 or 9 miscarriages, so that's crazy. Her husband didn't do anything useful except for telling her to keep on getting pregnant because we can't give up hope, and forced her to go through all of these stillbirths and whatnot over and over and over again. It doesn't sound like a fairy tale to me. And then when they got into financial trouble because they had been overspending, she's looking to her daughter as the life raft, as the savior. I mean, what were they doing for money before Amy came along and they started writing the Amazing Amy series? Her husband seems kind of stillborn himself, like useless. So true love won't save you. So that's the first generation. Then we bring it around to Amy herself. Amy had what seemed like true love in the beginning. And the reason why so many women relate to her is because she did what we're all told to do. Not in that much of an obvious way, but we are told to take on a man's interest as our own. Pretend you like football, watch his stupid movies, bro him up, girl, pretend like you get his jokes, give him all this love and affirmation, and then he will love you. And it worked in the beginning, but the minute she stopped playing a role all the time, the minute she started being herself, Nick was over it. And I mean, she was doing everything. She really was giving submissive provider because her parents had given them that brownstone. They were essentially living off of her trust fund, even though he worked and she worked. That was what was providing their cushy lifestyle. That's why they could maintain it once they both got fired. And until her parents borrowed the rest of her trust fund, Nick had no problem living off of the fat of the land. He tried to front like he didn't want to be a kept man, but he kept being one. When they were there, when they were down in his home state, she was footing the bill. And the minute Amy became inconvenient, not because of anything she did, but because his life wasn't turning out the way he wanted it to turn out. What do I tell you? Men use women to give themselves a sense of identity. So Amy hadn't changed. Amy was still the golden girl, but he resented her because his life wasn't going right. He was fired, He moves back home. He's got to take a crappy job at a local college in addition to owning the bar to try to make ends meet and give himself a new sense of identity. And he starts going with that college girl. He says it himself because she looked at him admiringly. Because she said, oh, he's got the career I used to want to have. He's been a real journalist. And he uses women. He uses their identities to make himself seem better. He's telling the, girls in his class that he's teaching, oh, I had to come home and take care of my family. And meanwhile, instead of taking care of your family, instead of taking care of your dying mother, you're somewhere fucking some bitch and playing around the bar with your twin, having a good old-fashioned time, Like Amy said, he's acting like the damn prom king who's breezed back into town and having fun and leaving all his responsibilities to her. So this book is about how being a good woman will bite you in the ass because, as Amy said, why don't I just divorce him? Because you're going to lose out, He spent your money on the bar. So if you split it in half, you're half of nothing is nothing. You've put $80,000 into this thing. $80,000, imagine that. You've put $80,000 into a bar that has never turned a profit. And now you'll get, peanuts from that. Even if you sell the building and whatnot, you've invested more into it than it's actually worth. And as she said, Nick's going to go on. He's going to be happier than ever. He's going to marry, as she said, this dumb guy. He's going to marry this stupid ass girl who, is this new cool girl, new bouncier cool girl, she said. And he's just going to keep going from woman to woman, getting their labor, getting their love. And you're the one who's lost everything. You've invested your whole life, your whole identity. You've given this man everything, and you will have nothing to show for it. I mean, just think about it logically. She divorces Nick. Where will she go? She's living in his home state. She can't afford to move back to New York. Not now, and certainly not after a divorce, which will cut in half the little meager pennies that they have. Amy doesn't have a job. She's living off the remnants of her property. And they're in the recession. Will she be able to get another job? I don't sit in judgment of Amy because this whole book is about how doing everything you're told to do as a woman is a big scam. Also, I think people just think because Amy was a scammer, she was a scammer. She was probably a narc. She was borderline. She was a lot of different things. She had a lot of different problems. But because they see that, they don't see what would have happened to a quote nice girl in her situation. If she had been a nice girl, Nick would have fucked her over. If she had been a nice girl and somehow gotten in contact with, what's his name? Desi Collins. He, I think, intended to kill Amy. When she said he had locked her up and told her that if she ever left, he was going to have to call the police. And, he could never stand her being out of his sight. The way he manipulated her back into dyeing her hair and being his fantasy. He was a dangerous man. So to me, the real message of the book is it's dangerous to deal with men as if they have your best intentions at heart, because they don't. You cannot blindly trust men. Love is not going to save you. So what are you going to do when all the things you've told were always going to be there for you? Marriage and being a good woman, patriarchy, playing a good role as a woman. When those fail, what are you going to do? Are you prepared? Because the system is set up in men's favor. He would have ended up better off if Amy had not taken extreme action. He would have played with Andy, probably never would have married her, but would have played with Andy for a while, used all the money that he got from Amy to enable his new life. His mother had passed away, so no responsibility on him, and he would have kicked up his heels, maybe even written a book about being married to amazing Amy and why it was all her fault it didn't work out, gotten a bunch of young co-eds to swoon at his feet, and gone on with his life like nothing ever happened. And I think that this is about thinking outside of the box, being creative, and not expecting life to sort of take a stayed and steadied road. You can't count on men. Amy couldn't count on her parents. She couldn't go running back to them. They didn't have any money except what they borrowed from her. And while I certainly don't agree with all of her methods, it's very interesting to me that the quote bad woman came out on top. By going an alternate path, she ended up with way more money. Her parents ended up paying back her trust fund with interest because of all the money that the amazing Amy books made when she was quote unquote kidnapped. She has her own book deal, amazing. She has Nick doing exactly what he wants. She wants. I think Gillian Flynn was somewhat clairvoyant because this book was written in 2012, and look at the discussions we're just now starting to have about like Ballerina Farm and everything like that. Once you get in so deep, there's no way out except, an extreme way. And Amy was smart enough to weaponize the cool girl trope in order to win, and you have to admire that. Have you ever noticed that even people who hate the book or the movie Gone Girl love the cool girl speech? This book/movie is extremely polarizing. People either love it or they hate it. Obviously, I'm in the love it camp. If no one else is obsessed with Gone Girl, I must have been incinerated because I'm going to love this book from my grave and beyond. I think one of my dad's biggest green flags is that this is his favorite movie. Like, he will watch it just over and over and over again, back to back. I love that we can share that. But anyway, the reason why even the people who hate Gone Girl love the cool girl speech is because of the truth of it. The reason why people hate Gone Girl is because they know it's reality. And the women who dislike it because this book/movie reveals there's not going to be a reward waiting on you for being the good girl. For playing the cool girl, you're not going to get anything but used, abused, and discarded. That the only way to level the playing field would be to become a bad, quote, bad woman. And a lot of women have a problem with that because they have been programmed to be good. And I think at this point, they've been so deeply programmed, they don't think they can stop playing that good wife role, but they also know that there's going to be no reward for it. They have already been in the beginning phase where they get kicked in the teeth, where they get let down, where they get cheated on, where they get mistreated and used continually because all they do is give, like the freaking giving tree, like Amy says. And they have not yet figured out how to transition into the second part of their lives where they can actually win. This will surprise you all, but I actually don't say everything that I think. I say perhaps 10 or 15%, because if I really started saying some of the things I think, you all would think, oh, she identifies too much with Amy. Oh, she's crazy. But one thing I do wholeheartedly agree with is the fact when she said a lot of women don't change. They just allow life to happen to them because they're lazy. I agree with that. Like the people, she ate that one little thing. She ate that one little thing because that is so true. Where she said some women's whole personalities are just made up of all the bad things that have happened to them. Well, you can't tell me that's not true. And I love that. I love that this book was really a journey of discovery. It might be an anti-hero's journey, but it's still a journey. What happens in the traditional hero's journey is a person, Hercules or somebody, starts from the bottom. They have a gift. Perhaps they were born divine, but in order to fulfill their purpose in life, they have to go down to the bottom. They have to be put in the worst possible circumstances to develop their character and eventually go through all these trials and tribulations that mean they land on top. Amy had the opposite because she's an anti-hero. She started at the top. She was born into wealth and white privilege and pretty privilege and everything else, but she went on a downward spiral. She lost all her money. She lost her job. Her husband cheated on her. He took her out of her New York posh existence to a rural nightmare where she didn't know anybody. Her family wasn't there, and she was entirely isolated, and nobody liked her. Every single gift that she started with was gone. So she had to use her mind to find a way to claw her way back to the top. And I think what so many women identify with when it comes to Amy Dunn is, women are consistently being told after a certain age, we're going to be discarded. She talks about this. She's like, now I'm closer to 40 than 30. My husband doesn't think I'm beautiful anymore. I'm just pretty for my age. Now he's cheating on me with a woman half my age. Her story is very relatable. But it's what she did next that, turns the tide. She doesn't do what a lot of women who are in that situation have done and try to turn the clock back, because you can't. There's no amount of trying to compete on those earlier terms that's ever going to work out in your favor. You can get all the plastic surgery. She didn't have any weight to lose, but you could lose weight if you wanted to. You can put on more makeup. You can do all of that stuff. But if you're competing on age and looks and whatnot, someone who is actually young is always going to have the advantage. What Amy did was use her experience. She used her mind rather than, feminine tropes to put Nick in his place. And she ended up weaponizing feminine tropes to, put him in a box. A lot of women would have said, oh, start being a more loving wife and cook for him or whatever. Amy pretended to cook for him to screw him over. She used all the tropes of what women are supposed to be, feminine and delicate and all that sort of thing. And by pretending to be pregnant, by pretending to be kidnapped, by pretending to be all of these things, she re-enthroned herself in her, what she considered her rightful place as queen of the world. And I just love that book. Obviously, do not commit any crimes. The book is fiction after all. But I love anything. And there are lots of true life books, Maya Angelou's autobiography, Harriet Jacobs' emancipatory narrative, all the stories of historically disenfranchised women where they start at the bottom. And, through many dangerous toils and snares, through racism, sexism, misogynoir, classism, they rise above the fray. So people who had nothing did it. You can do it too. So the main question I get about Gone Girl is, why did Amy want Nick back? She got everything she wanted, revenge achieved. Why did she want to force him to stay in the marriage with all the leverage she had over him? 2 reasons. First of all, she wanted her lick back and she wanted what she had been promised. We all know that Amy was playing the cool girl to get Nick, but Nick was playing the perfect guy. And I wish they had done more of an exploration of this in the movies. But Amy got pissed off on their first anniversary because she realized the man she had married was a lie. He never actually listened to her, which is why he could never solve the clues in the scavenger hunt. And Nick says in the book, oh, I've always found my wife dazzling. I think I have a dash of ADHD. All those excuses men use to never listen. But think about it. Amy uses her leverage to just make him into who he said he was going to be. She doesn't force him to clean the house top to bottom. She literally forces him to be a decent spouse. This is what Nick has to say after Amy comes back from, unaliving Desi. Me, Nick Dunn, the man who used to forget so many details, is now the guy who replays conversations to make sure I didn't offend, to make sure I never hurt her feelings. I write down everything about her day, her likes and dislikes in case she quizzes me. I'm a great husband because I'm very afraid she may unalive me. All Amy's done is make him do what she's been doing the whole time. She knows all his likes and dislikes, which is why she was able to frame him so easily. She knows everything about Nick, and Nick can't even remember basic stuff about her. I mean, as unhinged as it was, she spent all this time framing him for their 5th anniversary. He hadn't even bought her a gift. Here's what Amy has to say at the end of the book. Nick has spent all of his free time these past months slathering my belly with cocoa butter, running out for pickles, and rubbing my feet. Doing all the things good fathers-to-be are supposed to do, doting on me. He's learning to love me unconditionally under all my conditions. I think we're finally on our way to happiness. I have finally figured it out. And then, of course, Nick breaks the spell by saying something nasty to her. But this is why so many women resonated with the book, because they just want a husband who's going to act like what he said he was going to act like. Nick wooed her by pretending to be so in love and so caring and so patient, and then they got married and he was none of that stuff. He was inconsiderate. He spent up all her money. He only thought about himself, and then to crown all, after he dragged her down to Missouri and she was taking care of his dying mother and his father, he went out and had an affair with all that free time she gave him, using her money. Of course she was angry. But the other reason that this book ends the way it does, with her wanting Nick back and wanting to force him into being the perfect husband, is because it was published in 2012 by a woman who is born into Gen X. Remember, this is a new phenomenon, like decentering men, being happier by yourself and everything, acknowledging the reality of the situation. Women were always looking for the secret sauce before. Being married was seen as an accomplishment, even for someone who had as many natural gifts as Amy, who was accomplished in her own right, who had money, who didn't need Nick for survival. Being married was seen as a feather in your cap. More than that, something you needed to be normal. I feel like that's a very real entry from Diary Amy when she talks about how horrible she felt when her parents wrote that amazing Amy Gets Married book, and like how it made her look bad by comparison because she was older and she wasn't married. She was in her early 30s, a big bugbear back then, and not married. And she talked about being lonely and miserable, how her parents didn't understand her. She didn't have that many close friends. and she thought marriage was the solution. And again, I feel like that's another part of the book that many women related to when it came out, because that was a very prevalent mindset. And whatever else Gone Girl does, it so perfectly exposes how that will always fail. Amy got married because she was lonely and unhappy, and Nick made her happy at the time he was courting her. And then she ended up in a marriage where she was miserable and lonelier than ever. Amy's the original lonely wife. And at the end, I think she thought she needed marriage to be fulfilled. And she thought she could only get that by forcing Nick into a role with the leverage she had over him. She wanted Nick to act that way because she was certain it was going to give her that missing piece. Amy states, until Nick, I had never really felt like a person because I was always a product. Amazing Amy had to be brilliant, creative, kind, thoughtful, witty, and happy. We just want you to be happy. Rand and Mary Beth, her parents, said that all the time, but they never explained how. So many lessons and opportunities and advantages, but they never taught me how to be happy. With Nick, I finally understood because he was so much fun. He was the first naturally happy person I met who was my equal. He was brilliant and gorgeous and funny and charming and charmed. I was probably happier for those few years, pretending to be someone else for him, than I ever have been before or after. I can't decide what that means. And then later she says, Nick loved me, a 6-0 kind of love. It was intense, it was thick, it was passionate. But he only loved the cool girl. He loved someone I was pretending to be. So Amy, who is borderline and has a very interesting understanding of how life works, thinks this is life. You're pretending, he's pretending, and together you feel good about it. But the meta takeaway for women is she's not wrong. Most women are pretending to some extent to be someone else for their husbands or partners. Think about how many women change their political beliefs, change where they live, change their persona once they get with a guy who's into something different. And they do it because they think they're going to be fulfilled by this relationship, that they need a man and male validation to basically survive. And they think they're going to get something of equal value in exchange. And meanwhile, these men won't even give up a TV show for you. They won't give up anything for you. So keep on being yourself. I like to think that Amy eventually realized Nick wasn't worth the trouble, especially after he mouthed off. And, she just did away with him and found that she was much better off on her own with the baby. Gillian Flynn's been threatening a sequel for a minute now, and I really can't wait. Let's talk about the meaning of the Mistress character in Gone Girl. Very early in the book, after Amy goes missing, her husband Nick is revealed to be having an affair with one of his students, a college co-ed named Andy. Andie. This is very important because in the Amazing Amy books that her parents wrote about her childhood, her little boyfriend is called Able Andy, Andy. Andy is just able. He's just average. He's just capable. He's just good enough. Amy even calls the mistress Andy Able Andy a few times. There's a very strong allusion to the fact that she's just a convenience. Nick only went for Andy because she was the opposite of Amy. What does he say about her? I liked that I could still teach her things. What did he say about Amy? I had to be at my best. I had to learn things to date her. I had to become a student of the arcane and trivia. I had to push myself to my best level to woo her. With Andy, it's easy. In fact, here's a passage. Soon, Andy became the physical counterpoint to all things Amy. She laughed with me and made me laugh. She didn't immediately contradict me or second guess me. She never scowled at me. She was easy. It was all so effing easy. And I thought to myself, love makes you want to be a better man. Right. But maybe love, real love, also just gives you permission to be the man that you are. But it had nothing to do with love. Because after he's arrested by the police and he goes to get his lawyer, and the lawyer tells him you must break up with this woman immediately, in the airport, he says, it's amazing how I went from in love with Andy to not in love with Andy in one breath. Because she stopped being convenient. You never loved her. You liked the way she made you feel. But during their breakup, you realize Nick never knew Andy, the real Andy. Just like Amy, she was putting on a persona. The question is, why was she doing it? That's easy. The mistress wants to be the wife. She wants to win. Andy wanted to be Amy. Let's go back to the text. Nick says, Andy had never made Amy the enemy. She made her a character. She asked questions all the time about our life together, about Amy. What did you guys do together in New York? Like, what'd you do on the weekends? Andy's mouth went wide when I told her about going to the opera. You went to the opera? What did she wear? Full length? A wrap or a coat? And her jewelry and her hair? And what were Amy's friends like? What did you talk about? What's Amy like, really like? Was she like the girl in the books? These are the books that Andy grew up reading. Quick note. Was she perfect? It was Andy's favorite bedtime story, Amy. Think about that. Nick is spending time with his mistress. What does his mistress want to hear about? His wife, because she wants to be Amy. And I think Nick noticed this in a generalized way when he first started teaching the journalism class where he met Andy. He moves back to his small town in Missouri. He's teaching at the local community college, and he talks about how when he's doing the journalism, all the girls want to work in big city magazines. They want to be writers. What is Amy? A writer. And this is where the tone of the book shifts. And it was obvious what Andy was about from the beginning, but Nick chose not to see it because he was blinded by his own ego. So all the girls in his class were all over him because they learned he had the career they aspired to. He had been in New York working for a major magazine. He had been a writer, and they were asking, how do we get to do this? How can we walk in your shoes? Rather than being a man about it and admitting that he got fired because print journalism was dying, he made himself into the hero. Oh, we had to come home and take care of my mother, even though he wasn't taking care of his mother. Enter Andy. Andy's the small town girl who wants to be a sophisticated city girl. She wants to work for a magazine. She essentially wants to be a knockoff of Amy because this is all the stuff Amy did. But because of all the circumstances, the financial crash of '08 has already happened in the book. The small town that they all live in is dying. It's on the verge of collapse. There are almost no more magazines like that. Andy can't live her dream. So the thing she can take, the thing that she can make her fantasy with is Nick. The man is the easiest thing to steal, to imitate Amy's perfect life. So Andy was servicing her needs when she was playing cool girl for Nick. She was feeding into her own fantasy. And Nick only wanted her because he thought she was the opposite of Amy, when the gag is she was trying to become Amy by being with you. It was easier to be with a woman who didn't know him, who didn't know the hardship he had been through with his job and what a rotten person he was on the inside, than to do the work of mending his relationship with his wife. I love what happens when Nick goes to confront Desi Collins and they talk about relationships and how Amy is in relationships. And Desi says, see, when Amy likes you, when she's interested in you, her attention is so warm and reassuring and entirely enveloping, like a warm bath. Bear with me. He said, you feel good about yourself, completely good, maybe for the first time. And then when she sees your flaws, she realizes you're just another regular person she has to deal with. In actuality, Able Andy, remember the character from the books? And in real life, Able Andy would never make it with amazing Amy. So her interest fades, you stop feeling good, and you start feeling the old coldness again, like you're naked on the bathroom floor, and all you want is to get back into the warm bath of her attention. Nick is thinking inside, I know that feeling. I've been on the bathroom floor for about 3 years. So from Nick's perspective, all he wants is for Amy to go back to playing the cool girl and giving him all this attention and praising him for existing. And when she asked him to step up and be a husband and do the things he said he was going to do, like take care of his mother, who was dying of cancer, he got an attitude and decided it was easier to run off and have an affair. Because Able Andy was never mean to him. She was always nice. She was always kind. She was always welcoming. But was she? See, Nick's perception of Andy's youth changes based on his feelings. When he's happy with her, she's a sweet, innocent girl. He loves teaching her. But when she's angry or stressed, she's a dumb kid. When Tanner, his lawyer, is asking him to describe Andy, what does Nick say? She's needy. Clingy. She needs lots of reassurance. She's a really sweet girl, but she's young and, it's hard. And after Amy goes missing and Andy says she'll keep their affair secret, but she needs reassurance, she needs to know what's going on with him and everything, Nick continually perceives her as this annoying, ridiculous girl, because now that their affair can get him in real legal trouble, it's no longer so fun for him to sneak around. He sees her as an inconvenience, not a convenience like before. And it's the first time you, the reader, ever really hear Andy speak. You don't get to see Nick's perception of her. You see her speaking for herself, and you realize, A, Nick doesn't know this girl at all. And she's actually very intelligent and perceptive. Nick just never saw it because he never saw her as a person. Both the way that Nick and Amy perceive Andy as immature and naive is incorrect. So after meeting with his lawyer who told him to break up with Andy, Nick tries to shine Andy on with some bullshit story about how he needs to do the right thing and wait and see if Amy is found safe and sound, and then they can resume their relationship in the future. But everything they've been doing up until now is wrong. He says, "I'm sorry, Andy. I don't think it's right for me to be with you right now. It's dangerous for you. It's dangerous for me. It doesn't sit well with my conscience. It's just how I feel." And Andy replies, "You know how I feel? I feel like a dumb college girl you started effing because you were bored with your wife and I made it extremely convenient for you. You could go home to Amy and eat dinner with her and play around in your little bar that you bought with her money, and then you could meet me at your dying dad's house and jack off on my, what? Because poor you, your mean old wife would never let you do that." Nick responds, "Andy, please. I think that because you haven't been able to talk about this stuff, everything's gotten a little bigger in your mind, a little." And she says, "Fuck you. You think I'm some dumb kid, some pathetic student you can manage? I stick by you through all this talk about how you might be a murderer. And as soon as it gets a little tough for you, you're out? Oh, no. You don't get to talk about conscience and decency and guilt and feel like you're doing the right thing. Do you understand me? Because you're a cheating, cowardly, selfish shit." Andy always knew what she was doing. She always knew the role she was playing because she was playing cool girl, just like Amy did to get Nick. And honestly, on some level, I think she knows Amy was playing cool girl to get Nick. She knows what Nick liked. And just like Amy, once Nick hurt her, she was out for revenge, which is why she did the worst possible thing she could. She dressed up like the girl next door and had a huge press conference and announced to the world she had been having an affair with Nick. And then she started cooperating with the police, which got him arrested. Now, Nick deserved this. It appeared to all the world that he was cheating on his wife because he was having an affair and she disappeared under mysterious circumstances. But Andy also deserved the pain that she got, because she knew good and doggone well the whole time this man was married. And she was asking him all about his wife, trying to imitate her and become her. You get what you pay for. But I love the interaction of all these characters. It is truly fascinating. There will always be something new to be observed in them forever.